As we continue to mark the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, we bring you the incredible story of Heather Penney. Her call sign is Lucky. And back in 2001, she was a rookie F-16 pilot, one of America's very first female fighter pilots, in fact, when she was asked to give her life for her country. Her mission was to ram her unarmed jet into United Flight 93, which was then believed to be heading to another target, likely the U.S. Capitol. It would be a suicide mission, one she accepted without hesitation. I recently had the opportunity to talk with this American hero. So let's go back almost 20 years ago.
I'm Charles Gibson.
I'm Diane Sawyer. It's Tuesday, September 11th, 2001.
You hear someone say, somebody's just flown a plane into the World Trade Center. What was your immediate response?
We did not appreciate and did not have the full knowledge that this was an airliner that had been deliberately flown into the World Trade Center.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York City.
We don't know if it would have been deliberate or accidental. We know so little now.
And so it wasn't until we learned of the second aircraft,
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
that we ended our meeting and then moved to where we could see those images on the television like every other America. And that's when we knew that our nation was under attack.
And what were your marching orders then at that point?
We needed to get armed missiles built up and then loaded up onto our aircraft. And then we also needed to get the authorization to launch. And both of those were a challenge.
But then at some point, you are told that you need to be prepared to shoot to kill.
The region commander has declared that we can shoot down aircraft that do not respond to our direction. Copy that?
You're flying a plane where you don't have that ability to shoot. And so what were you supposed to do then?
When Sass and I took off, we did not have missiles. We were on a suicide mission. And in order to be able to take any airliner down, Sass would ram his aircraft into the cockpit where the terrorists were to destroy the flight controls. And I would take the tail. By targeting both ends of the aircraft, it was our plan to prevent it from any additional casualties.
And how did that, when that dawns on you that that may be your call, does it register? Are you processing that? Or you're just thinking, okay, this is the mission at hand and we need to operate accordingly?
Anyone who had seen the footage of and the videos of what had happened knew what needed to be done. And I had raised my hand and sworn an oath to protect and defend our nation. What was going through my mind was that if this was where the universe had placed me at this point in time, that this was my purpose. Anyone who had been in our position would have been willing to do the same thing. And the proof is in the pudding, because the passengers on Flight 93 did.
Just going back to you for a moment, is there a prayer? Are there tears? Or you just react and you're not feeling?
There was no second guessing. We knew what needed to be done. And there was no tears. The prayers, to be honest, was simply knowing that, dear God, don't let me mess this up.
We talked about your first mission that day. Ultimately, it changes, right? Tell me then about when you're tasked with making sure that the president lands safely.
I finally landed and then took off for a second sortie. We did a combat air patrol, this time with armed missiles, and then eventually went out to intercept Air Force One with President Bush, who is also being escorted by other fighters, other F-15s as well, to be able to bring him back home into Andrews Air Force Base safely.
I've been told that your nickname is Lucky. Do you feel about that day that you were lucky in any sense?
No, I don't, because Sass and I were a mission failure. We got off the ground too late.
United 93 was waving his wings as he went past the VFR aircraft. They don't quite know what that means.
And had the passengers on Flight 93 not had the courage and the service and the sense of what their duty was to protect other Americans, we would never have been launched in time to intercept them before they reached Washington, D.C. and our nation's capital. I don't consider myself lucky because what they did was something they never should have had to do.
When did you process it all? I mean, is it that night? Is it weeks later? Was there any trauma for you personally around the intensity, the magnitude of it all?
I really didn't think about 9/11 until nearly a decade later, because we went into training to spin up for initial combat operations in Iraq. So life for me didn't slow down. And frankly, it didn't for anybody in the military. So thinking and reflecting on 9/11 really didn't occur for me until nearly a decade later, when the commemoration ceremonies began to look at honoring the first responders. And that's really when I began to think about what I witnessed that day and the meaning of the sacrifice of those first responders and the heroism that they all displayed.
A number of people have also talked about it in terms of how the country seemed to come together. You know, how really that horror really galvanized the nation. When you look at now, 20 years later, how divided we are, any thoughts now as we look to honor those and remember the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks?
Absolutely. And what you said about how our nation came together, that to me is a legacy that we all should strive to never forget. But instead, you know, as you mentioned, there's so much divisiveness, so much vitriol, so much fear, so much hatred, and so much anger. But we're hooked on that because of the adrenaline rush that we get through that news cycle and the algorithms that we live within, and how we've become so socially isolated through the pandemic has not helped us. We have to make a commitment to civility. We have to make a commitment to engaging in that kind of dialogue and remembering that there are things that connect us. And those connections, what it means to be an American, is so much more than the differences that between us.
What do you remember most vividly about that day?
The blue skies. How crystal blue the skies were that day. There's so many moments that I remember with such clarity that I can touch, taste, feel, hear, smell every detail from that day. But what strikes me the most, because of how omnipresent it was throughout the entire day, was the deep, clear blue skies.
Our thanks to Lucky for sharing her perspective and story with us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.